if I ask you this simple question, that tell me that disorders like sickle cell trait or G6PD deficiency or the thalassemia offers protection against which infectious disease? You would obviously tell me the answer is malaria. Now, what is the connection between malaria and these disorders like G6PD deficiency or thalassemia or sickle cell trait? And why these disorders are more common in the malaria endemic areas? These are the two questions which you try to answer in this session. So let's take example of thalassemia. Thalassemia, if you look at the geographical distribution, they are much more common in certain parts of the world. Like starting with, they are seen in Middle East region, they are seen in the parts of the Southeastern Asia and Indian subcontinent. Southeastern Asia typically will be seen in the more common in the Thailand, Malaysia, Brunei, Laos, Cambodia, Singapore. In these regions, there are more cases of thalassemia we see. Also, it's very common in the Mediterranean region like Greece, Italy, Cyprus, in all these countries. And all these regions, the hotbed for thalassemia was once upon a time highly malaria prone areas, malaria endemic areas, and still in some areas there is malaria still is quite rampant. So the idea is that why this happens now we understand through the understanding of the evolutionary medicine. The idea is that once upon a time, maybe thousands of years ago, there was not anti-malarial drugs, and at that time people were dying rampantly due to the malarias like falciparum malaria, and there was no treatment for them discovered at that point of time. So Mother Nature thought in this way that if I tweak the RBCs a little bit, if I cause some changes in G6PD or cause some changes in the alpha or beta chain synthesis, and as a result the internal environment becomes non-conducive for the growth of the malaria parasite, then at least it can cause some damage, it can cause some hemolysis, but at least the people would not die due to malaria parasite. That's the basic idea from the Mother Nature's perspective why these tweak and changes were made. Now, you know, in thalassemia what is happening? Thalassemia is basically a genetic disorder where there is a alteration in the reduced globin chain synthesis. In alpha thalassemia, there is a reduced alpha globin chain synthesis. In beta thalassemia, there is a reduced beta globin chain synthesis. So the ratio 1:1, which should always occur classically of alpha and beta globin chain, it's not occurring. And when it is not occurring, one chain is produced in excess. It pair up with another same kind of excess chain, like beta can pair up with another beta or alpha can pair up with another alpha. And these products are basically toxic and precipitate inside the RBCs. And that also make this hemoglobin non-soluble. And when these RBCs they pass through the spleen, they get destroyed by the spleen in the form of extravascular hemolysis. And some of them they also die, the majority of them they also die due to ineffective erythropoiesis. But that's a separate thing about thalassemia. But the idea is that if I made this tweak or change, what is going to happen? The internal environment of the RBC would become miserable for the survival of the parasite. And that is the Mother Nature's intervention here, that why these changes were made. Similarly, if we think about G6PD deficiency, G6PD deficiency is also seen in those parts of the world where malaria was once very common and still now very common. And the reason is that if I alter the cause some form of G6PD deficiency, that red blood cell would become much more prone for hemolysis due to oxidative stress. And that would also impact these malaria parasites because these malaria parasites could not survive in that RBC. So this is the same thing is true for sickle cell trait. Sickle cell trait is also very common in those parts of the world where malaria is common, and this confers some form of resistance against the malaria infection. Another thing they have seen that Dantu, a Dantu blood group which is seen in the eastern part of the Africa, they also give some resistance against the malaria infection, particularly falciparum malaria. And the idea is same that in this Dantu blood group, what is seen that there is a alteration in the glycophorin. So this changes the surface tension of the RBC, and now the malaria parasite cannot penetrate through that RBC. So it also gives protection against the malaria infection. So the key idea is here is this, that all these changes which we see like thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, sickle cell trait particularly, G6PD deficiency, it was initially actually is a part of the evolution where it was created to give some form of protection against malaria in those parts of the world where malaria is very much rampant to give us protection from the death, because at that time malaria, anti-malaria drugs were not available and a lot of people are dying. But all these changes were basically made by the mother nature in some form milder changes. But what happened that as this one people get married to the another people in the same community, these genetic variations becomes much more complex, and the disease in the sometimes two carriers are mating with each other, that would create a much more severe form in the offspring. So that's how the disease become much more severe and rampant. But all these changes were initially made by the evolution actually in form of milder form of disease, not the severe form of the diseases. So this is the so that is the reason why these diseases like thalassemia or sickle cell trait or G6PD deficiency you'd be seeing in those part of the world where malaria was very common and still now very common, and why these disorders give some form of protection against the malaria infection. That's the basic idea. Thank you so much.